and welcome to the Fostering Client to be your moderator for this discussion. This is the second live stream that we're doing as part of the National Reentry Resource Training Series here in New York City. So thank you all for joining us today here in person and also on the live stream. We appreciate it. The NRRC is going to be hosting 3 additional live streams throughout the summer and the fall, so we hope that you all will be looking out for those announcements and will join us for those as well. On site today, we have grantees from the Second Chance Act Mentoring and Young Fatherhood programs. For those of you joining the live stream, please feel free to post questions in the message box on the right hand of the screen, and for those of you in person, we'll be counting on you for some good questions as well. Actually, thank you. Charlie A., Director of Consulting and Training. Okay. At Task. He is going to be doing a presentation that really focuses on client engagement from a systems approach perspective. So we'll be looking forward to starting off with Jack's presentation. He will be followed by Amelia Murphy, who's the Director of Support Services at Santa Maria Hostel in Houston, Texas, currently a mentoring grantee as well, and she will be focusing her presentation on issues. Finally, last but not least, of course, we'll have Vivian Dixon, who's our Executive Director for College and Community Fellowship in New York, also a mentoring grantee, and she's going to close the panel with her observations on what really leads to successful engagement. The grantees in this room have accepted BJA's charge to promote more effective and successful reentry for offenders through the establishment and maintenance of pre- and post-release mentoring relationships, which sounds really easy and very concise here, but I think you all know in person and on the live stream much more difficult to do in practice. To do this, organizations are committed to providing a wide range of reentry services that really focus on reducing an individual's risk of recidivism among other transitional services as well. We know that your programs are supported through Second Chance Act funds administered by the Bureau of Justice Assistance and the Office of Juvenile Justice, and Delinquency Prevention. More specifically, we know that you're really in charge of delivering and brokering transitional services for reentry in addition to also providing mentoring services as well. Many folks in the room, as well as folks on the live stream, provide evidence-based services to reduce recidivism and promote other healthy outcomes. But I think that you all know better than me, of course, that the services that you provide, it's hard for them to be effective if you don't have clients showing up to actually engage in those services. And so what we really want to talk about today are the different approaches for engaging clients in your services that you have to offer. We'll be covering topics from improving those particular services that you offer to improving client-level interactions, to offering incentives for participation, as well as looking at process barriers inside the actual organizations that might be affecting client engagement as well. So we're really looking forward to all of the presentations today, having you all here in person and on the live stream as well. So thank you again for joining us, and we'll go ahead and get started with Jack.
Thank you, Katie. And thank you to the Council of State Governments for inviting me here today. As I always say, we'll find out afterwards if it was worth their money or not. So you guys tell me if I get a hotel reimbursed or not. Good afternoon to all of you who are here with us in the room today, as well as all those who are joining us via the magic of the internet over live stream. This is going to be a good conversation, a good post-lunch conversation about fostering client engagement through mentoring. And before I get going, I want to acknowledge my co-panelists, Amelia and Vivian. I've seen their presentations, and I think you guys are in store for just a good hour, hour and a half of conversation. My name is Jack Charlier. I'm with the Center for Health and Justice at Task. The Center for Health and Justice provides solutions to drugs and crime at the intersection of the public health system and the public safety system, which, to Mike's opening comments about criminal justice reform, all that stuff is hovering around kind of public health approaches to deal with public safety. So it's a really good place to be. And I work for TASK, Treatment Alternatives for Safe Communities. Many of you know who we are. We provide life-changing opportunities for people whose substance use disorders and mental health challenges put them at chronic risk for exposure to the criminal justice system. So before I get going, let me just say that as a person from Chicago, I'm always excited to come to New York City. There's a nickname that we have for New York City and Chicago called the Second City and the Small Apple. Has anybody heard of that? Yes, okay. All right, let's get going here then. So what I'm going to talk about is how to supercharge your mentoring impact from a systems approach. Question: how many of you in the mentoring work that you do consider yourself to be part of a system? A show of hands. Good. Okay, maybe a little bit under half. How many of you have conversations with your system partners? In other words, you could tell me who some of your partners are in your system that you work in. Okay, so a little bit less than that. Okay, good. So that means at least half of you will feel as pretty under half. Go take a break for 18 minutes. I'm going to start approach, and really Vivian will kind of get down below 30,000 feet. And this is really how we look at stuff at the Center for Health and Justice. And so if you're wondering kind of, this is not about one-on-one mentor to mentee. It's not about organizational, how you work within an organization, but a system is how does your organization relate to the other organizations, and you all claim you're doing the same work. The question is, are you, and how do you know if you are, and what does that mean for you if you systems approach? So I'm going to put up 3 questions on the board here on the slide. Do you need to supercharge your mentoring? Okay. And take a look at these questions. I'll just put them up. I'm not going to read them. Take a look at these questions. Okay. If the answer questions, and I won't do a show of hands here, right? We'll point the cameras at you guys. Show your hands if it's no. If the answer to one or more of these questions is no, you might need to supercharge your mentoring, okay? You might need to figure out, well, how do I get into the system of which I am supposedly a part of, but maybe don't feel like I'm a part of, doesn't recognize the work I do. And the bang for buck proposition, that's the phrase I use, the bang for buck proposition that comes from all the work we do just isn't happening. Mike Thompson's opening comments about the focus on our field right now, which has always been there, but usually bad stuff, right? It's like front page and newspaper stuff. But the focus on the field means that our ability to deliver a bang for buck proposition while we have people's attention and people's money is a big, big deal. So if you answered no to one or more of these questions, you might need to, as I said, supercharge your mentoring. And the way to do it, to begin to do it, is from a systems approach, So back to school for just one slide, I promise, and then we'll get back to us as practitioners. System approach is about finding solutions by looking at the whole and the parts and how they should best providing something to the system that's big. Well, mentoring fosters do mentoring. That's just a service. I can buy that anywhere I want. I'm increasing client engagement. I'm improving client engagement. Now, to the system, though, it has to go one step further. Client engagement increases or reduce recidivism. Does mentoring improve public safety? Does mentoring reduce crime towards reentry? Do not say I provide mentoring services, because services are a commodity and can be bought anywhere by anybody. What you do is you reduce crime. That's what you do. That's what the public's paying all of us to do. What you do is help successful reentry. You promote public safety so people don't get attacked on the streets, robbed, and all that good stuff, okay? That's the way to understand your value add. Now, you have to figure that out for your organization, but if you're in mentoring, it's somewhere in here. The question is, which of the shared outcomes that the whole system recognizes are you driving towards, okay? And in order to supercharge your mentoring for maximum impact, this is what you have to do. You like to be known in your system as a piece that cannot ever be excluded, and in fact must have what happen? We must expand you, because you deliver so much value to the work we do on public safety that I need more of you. And that kind of advocacy done by the system player. Supercharge Your Mentoring Impact. Again, going back to that initial list of 3 questions that we had up there, if you answered no to 1 or more of them, this may be stuff that you want to do. And if you didn't, but you're not doing any of these 3, you may want to consider starting to do it. So first of all, you got to be at the system table, okay? This does not mean you're a subcontractor, you've been awarded a grant. This is really being at the table where the decision makers of your system are. And I won't go into kind of what this all means. Oh, have I worn out the microphone? Wait a minute, do I have to restart because you recorded none of it? All my words of wisdom are lost. All right, so be at the system table, right? Because you can't add value if no one knows who you are or that you are there. That's really important. And, you know, for people who provide mentoring and nonprofits, kind of going out of prisons and faith-based organizations, you're left off to the side a lot. Let's just call it what it is. You are left off to the side a lot, and people don't think about you. And the problem is that that's their mistake, but it's also your mistake because you got to be at the table, okay? Include mentoring and shared outcomes. We talked about that already. Place mentors in cross-system roles. Your mentors, not just you as paid staff, but your mentors are a valuable asset and have something to say about how to make your system perform better. This is not, you know, kind of warm and fuzzy, oh, the people who live the experience get to say something about it. It's not that. When properly trained like anybody else, they have actual insights into how things can work better. Not because they're smarter than us, not because they're better than us, but because they have an understanding of the slice of the system that other people might not have. It's actually pretty simple. But do you have your mentors in cross-system roles, which means are they interacting at a high enough level with other system partners, okay? Be part of system decision-making. That's kind of an obvious one, but the question is, on this one, are decisions being made for your organization where you're involved as an equal player, or are they just being made for you and then you get the email that shows up that says, you've got 3 more mentors, you know, that we can fund. Good, I didn't know anything about that. Excellent, I guess, you know. All right. Secondly, educate your system on the mentors. And these are 3 really simple kind of beginning steps based on those initial questions. Educate your system on mentors. I'm going to offer you this. My background is criminal justice. I'm a gun and badge guy by background. I'm a former deputy chief. I will tell you this. For the most part, from the justice perspective, big generalization coming here. I warn you. We look at, and I say we, kind of, you know, big generalization, we look at mentors, especially those who are justice involved, as just gangbangers, addicts, and people who are just going to cause us a problem, but we have to deal with them because they're part of what we're told to do. We know that's not true, but with education on the value of mentors, especially when they're justice involved, it's a big, big deal because you can move us beyond that and say, look, there's actually something going on here, and I hate to tell you this, it may actually get a better bang for buck than what you're doing, but we won't say that too loud, right? So educate your system on mentors, develop value-add talking points. Why should parole care about the mentors? Why should they reinforce and support the message that parolees are getting from their parole officer that the mentors are getting? Why? If I don't think you're valuable, I actually don't really care what you have to say. So develop your talking points that say, here's the value to the rest of the system of our mentors. Introduce mentors in person as team members. Let me just tell you something. It's really hard to hate someone when you meet them. I mean, it's just like, oh, you know, Jack, he's this, he's that. Then you meet me and you guys are, you know, you can see I'm a really good-looking, smart guy, and you won't hate me anymore, right? So, but you're all really supposed to laugh at that. Boy, I guess I'm not going to dinner with you guys tonight. Share research on mentors. We got some good research on mentors, right? That's why you're here. That's why the feds are funding it, because the federal government never throws its money away. Oh, that wasn't a joke. The first one was, that wasn't. All right, share research on mentors. There's a supervision and selection process for mentors. Again, especially those who have the criminal justice involved background going into the criminal justice system. I promise you a lot of the folks in criminal justice don't know how those folks were selected. They may think they do, but they don't know. And again, they're here, they're charity cases, they're that pastor who's on the TV all the time who brings his guys in and his women in. That's a lot of what's going on in the thinking of some criminal justice people. So Tell them about the supervision and selection process. Share the research. Share the successes you have, and you have a lot of success stories that are worth telling. But if you're not at the table on number one, you can't share the success stories with anybody but yourself, and then you're preaching to the choir. You want to share it with the system. And finally, eliminate conflicting and mixed messages about the value of mentors. When your mentors are out talking to your mentees, right, the message they are conveying should match the message that the justice system, the behavioral health system, and the community is saying. Well, the community is a little different, actually. They can say what they want because they're citizens. But the behavioral health system and the justice system, all those messages should be aligned. So if justice is saying do this, A, and behavioral health says do A, but the mentors say B, we've got a problem. And if I were under supervision in the justice, I would go with what my parole or probation officer or the judge was telling me to do, and I'd say, thank you, mentor, I'm out of here. You can't have that problem occur. You have to have alignment of message. And finally, and I'm down to 1 minute, so I'm right on time here, educate the mentors themselves. This, by the way, comes from mentors themselves. This is not Jack as a criminal justice guy writing this in there. This comes from mentors themselves. Do they understand their role in, get ready for this, in preventing crime, in public safety, especially when there's justice involved? And I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean it in a sense of, do they get that they are now on the other side? And what does that mean for them? That's actually very empowering if you think about it for a group that has been stigmatized for so long to be told, okay, now, you know, like on Andy Griffith, you're now deputized, right? We won't give them the one bullet, but you're now deputized, okay? The justice and behavioral health system, again, this comes from mentors. They have an understanding of criminal justice and behavioral health, but really their slice of it is probably, their understanding of it is no greater than anybody else's. They have a unique slice. If you've ever been through the justice system, they have a unique slice that I have not been through it. I've worked in it, but they don't fully understand it any more than anybody else. So they also need to be educated. Relationship with the community. Big one, this could be a whole kind of afternoon. We do a lot of civic engagement work. I got to tell you, when you victimize people in a community, it's really hard to come back through and say, by the way, I'm on this side of the line now and now I'm a good guy. That's really, really hard. There's lots of human things wrapped up into first being the person who was either known or you viewed as doing the victimization, and now you say you're here to help. And align their story with shared system outcomes, right? The idea, going back to the initial thought, what is your value proposition? What is your value add? What's the bang for buck? And the mentors need to be part of the group that conveys that to the system. Okay, so are you ready to supercharge your mentoring? Doesn't that sound like a slogan or something like that? I actually didn't mean it that way, but are you ready to supercharge your mentoring? Good, I think I'm just on time. Good.
I'm going to join you so we can share mics if you want to stay with me. All right, so we're gonna have a few minutes for questions, and so we have somebody who will be walking around with a microphone for folks that have questions in the audience, and then for those who are on live stream, if you have any questions, there should be again a box for messages in the right-hand corner of your screen, and you can go ahead and type in your question, and we can read that out loud. So we'll go ahead and start with folks from the audience. I see that there's a question back there. If we can go ahead and we'll get the microphone to you, and then we'll go ahead and get started.
Thank you.
Jump in and out.
My question is to victimizing the community. If you have a mentor that has done that and a mentee, how would you reintroduce them to the community as a new individual, someone who's coming back to redo exactly what he's done?
So two things. Again, I talk about this from a systems approach, the large-scale 30,000-foot view. So Vivian and Amelia, if they were to get that question, may answer it differently. First thing is, from a systems approach, the system players that say this person is going to be a mentor have to do the introduction. That's a really, really big deal. So if someone who has, in fact, victimized the community, and we're, you know, let's not exaggerate on kind of who we're thinking of, someone who's kind of done the run-of-the-mill stop and rob stuff, which is real and has impact. So I want to kind of keep it in that arena. We're not talking about someone who's murdered someone. That's a whole different ballgame. So the system players who say Jack is going to be a mentor and is going to work in a community that he victimized, one of the best things you can do then is line up, and I don't mean this for a dog and pony show, but line up, say it's parole, probation, the judge, especially if they're elected, the judge, the nonprofit, the respected faith and community leaders to say, here's our team. And we want to go through and have a real conversation with everybody in the community about who's on the team. It may not just be, by the way, the person you're referring to that people have challenges and problems with, but that's the one thing that I think of from a systems perspective. And then a little bit lower than that is the use of, and this is a little bit out of my area, but use of things like restorative justice to make sure that the person's not just reintroduced too fast, but the conversations have occurred for a sense of healing to happen also, right? The speed with which someone goes from being in the justice system to now not a mentor to now a mentor is really actually a critical piece of it, so that they're not viewed so recently that I remember you from a year ago when you did this to my house. That's a tough transition. A few years down the road, but again, let the system do the introduction. By the way, the system means everybody, not the nonprofit or the church that has the grant to pay the person, because they are out there completely on their own then at that point. So that's the big frame picture. And again, Amelia and Vivian may get you down farther under 30,000 feet on that question.
Anyone else in the audience? Bonnie, are there any live stream questions?
Whenever I do systems conversations, there's almost usually no questions. So in fact, there's two is great.
So we have a question coming in from a couple of different folks about a memorandum of understanding between a mentor and a mentee, and how that goes about and what kind of conversation or contract happens between those two parties.
Okay, I think that's a little bit out of where I am except for one item, and that would be this, that in a contract, a memorandum of understanding, so again, that's really very granular, right? That's kind of down in the weeds from where the system level is. However, the perspective that an MOU is written between one organization and another, I would say that that MOU with a mentor or mentee, or a mentor, yeah, mentor, that is something that the entire system gets to have some say on, right? Not to bog it down and turn it into like a 32-page document, but the idea that parole, probation, the courts, the behavioral health organizations, the other faith-based partners get to have an understanding of, well, what could this thing look like that works for all of us, so that not just one organization is writing up their MOU. And by the way, when that happens, that means another organization writes up their MOU, and it has slightly different things in it than your organization. But these are things that I would certainly include in an MOU, is an understanding so that the mentor has an understanding of what are the shared outcomes, and write it explicitly in there. This is what we're asking you to work towards. It's not just going to talk to people and share your stories and find affinity. We get that. That's the bridge by which mentors do well in connecting with people, but that the conversation is about public safety and is about reduced recidivism. And so I think these things up here, relationship with the community, kind of some things around what does it look like when you have encounters with the community, not so much on a one-on-one level, but you're now representing an organization, and more you're representing a system. And again, when the system writes the MOU and everybody's had a chance to look at it, and be careful because government folks like to add lots and lots and lots of stuff, but when they have a chance to write it, that means they'll do what also? They'll support it. They'll support it, okay? So that's the best I can answer that question, I think, for where this is. Yes?
So I think we have time for one more question.
I just wanted a little clarity on when you said to be at the table, at the systems table. How far up the food chain are you talking, or?
Go up as high as you can go. There's no reason not to. The higher you go is where the decisions are made about what. What's the main decision made up high? Money. How many of you get paid for your jobs? I can see all, by the way, I can actually see into the cameras now. Everybody on live stream is raising their hand. Although I asked that once a week ago to a very small group, and like they looked around at each other, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't mean. It's like, uh-oh, I guess you guys may not get paid as much as you think. Get as high as you can. Why? Because you are doing good work that's contributing to public safety. Why would you not be seated at the same table that everybody else is? You have a value add, and you can state your value add. You can state why what you do is valuable. So you should be at the same table where everybody else is, saying the exact same thing of why I'm important. Okay? Good. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Can everyone join me in saying thank you to Jack? Positive reinforcement. Great. Thank you. And up next, we have Amelia Murphy, who's the Director of Support Services at Santa Maria Hostel. Amelia? You can join me in welcoming her.
Should we forward your slides? Okay, thanks.
Good evening. My name is Amelia Murphy. I'm so excited to be in New York. I'm telling you, when I got off the plane last night, we were, it was as if, you know, the cab, I had this little thing with, a guy said, do you need to get to where you need to go to now? And I said, yes. And so he began to take my luggage, and he said, that'll be $65. And then the toll, and I said, oh, and then I'm looking at the cabs, and I'm like, well, why can't I take the cab? And he said, well, you're wasting my time. And I said, yes, we're both wasting our time. And so I hurriedly took my luggage. I said, oh, yes, let me get over here. It's not that quick of a time. So good to be in New York. I had some good food last night. I want to thank Nicole Jarrett, the Council of State Government, and I have had fun working with these grants, the second-term grantee, and we've had a lot of challenges, but I'm so excited to talk about this now today and engaging women in recovery. I am a director for Recovery Support Services for Santa Maria. It's the General Pacific population for women and children. We've been doing this for over 50 years. And so I work with the treatment for substance abuse and mental health, and also with the criminal justice. And I'm also a director for some wonderful coaches that are tirelessly out there in the community providing services for these women. Women are a lot of work. Repeat after me, women are a lot of work. Women are a lot of work. I can't hear you. A lot of work. So I want to give high fives to my recovery coaches. Also, I am a woman in long-term recovery, and what that means is that I haven't had any drugs or alcohol or committed any crimes since July 13, 1990. I celebrate 25 years. Okay. So we're going to talk about what is recovery. Recovery is that process of change through which these individuals will improve their health and wellness. They're going to learn how to self-direct their lives, and the end result is so that they can reach their full potential. They're going to do that in 4 key areas, and that is going to be in their health, home, purpose, and community. So their health is about the education of their disease of addiction, and they also learn about physical health, emotional health, and mental health. And what about their home? So they're being released, and so they're wondering, do I go back to family, and what does it look like, what do I do there? And so the recovery coach walked beside them to help navigate that, what that looks like being in their newfound life of recovery, and so their purpose. So without meaning and purpose, what is it that we do? You must identify your meaning and purpose, and also integrating them into the community. Now, what is recovery coaching? And I want to ask a couple of questions before I get it. It's a strength-based approach, and I love it because it works. But I want to go through this quickly. We was looking at being from and to. So from control-oriented to oriented to choice. From power over people to awaken the people power. From diagnosis, I love this one, to personal meaning. From treatment to growth and discovery. From staff, and we say clients, to experts by training and experience. From focusing on the disorders to focusing on the person. And this is my favorite, the last one, all of them are my favorites actually. From illness-based to strength-based practices. So we also work with individuals when they come out of incarceration. They're worth a coach, and I'm going to go through that process. Oh, I have to keep my mic. Okay, see, I told you I'm just out there. So, and they come out, and their good intentions is to follow the plan, and not all the time they do that. And so when they don't follow the plan, they relapse. And we're right there with them through that whole process. So I want to get into that process with you. So this is what we do. We have initial engagement. We don't just sit there with them doing the recovery orientation and get information, and then we're going to make a plan for you to integrate into the community. What we do is we get to know them. They get to know us because the coaches are with lived experience, and they get to hear the conversation from them to see if it's a good fit. And so that goes into being in a resource broker stage, so that when we have this formal training to become coaches, and I'll talk a little bit about that later, that is some of the responsibility, if not most of the responsibility for the recovery coach, is to be a resource broker. So you're supposed to know your resources, whether it's coming from employment, education, social programming, whatever it is, from detox treatment programs, mental health programs. As Jack was talking about the systems, we're to know those systems and know them well. And that leads into recovery planning. So we don't get to do the plan. Guess who get to do the plan? The individual in recovery. They get to plan their life, and we get to do it with them. And also, we start moving forward because the person is now in recovery. Okay? Now, this is Jill. Jill has been in and out of the system for 10 years. Oh, Jill has been in and out of the system for 10 years. So she finally says, I want a recovery coach. Let me try something different. So she does. And when she gets to do that, we start that initial engagement process. So what happens is she begins to hear the recovery coach talk about her experience and how chaotic it was in her family, what that meant for her, what did the streets do for her, and where she is today. So she gets to identify the peer-to-peer model. Okay? So after Jill talks about all of these issues, guess what the recovery coach says? Jill, how can I help you in your recovery today? We do not reflect in those problem issues. Just think about it. Jill is talking to me about all these things that are going on in her life, and I'm saying to Jill, Jill, how can I help you in your recovery today? What does that do? She's looking for me to tell her what to do. She's looking for me to give her a plan or some resources to figure it all out. And we don't do that because what are we doing when we're doing that? Taking away the power, so we're empowering them. So the connection begins. So how do we get this done with the recovery coach? The recovery coach, we use this beautifully. It's the MI technique. And what we are trying to understand when we use the Dorrancy approach is to understand this. What is her motivation to change? Okay? So we start with the desire. You say that you want to get out and you want to go and you want to do all these things. So we're going to determine, based on this approach, your desire to do that. And then we're going to find out the ability. Does she have the ability for those goals that she's talking about? Does she have, what are your reasons? What are your reasons? And then what is the need to do that? And then finally, we get that commitment. So once we do the commitment, then we put that on the recovery wellness plan, and that goes into the coaching technique. But I do want to explain something that the coaches are not. Coaches are not counselors. Coaches are not therapists. They're not doctors. They're not bankers. They're not clergy people. We don't try to diagnose people. If someone says, if Jane Doe says, I've just been in the bed, I cannot get up, I don't understand. We don't say, well, I think you may have depression. You may want to go to MHMR. We don't do that. We began to write down some of the things that she's experiencing, and we do reflective listening, and we may want to ask her, would you like to add that to your recovery wellness plan? Let's take a look at that together. So this is the core, and I have I think I have a short time to explain this, but this is the core. What is recovery capital? This is the volume of external and internal assets that help them sustain their recovery, and this is how it's done. There is 3 areas that we address in the recovery capital. What we do is we talk about their social capital. What does that look like? About your family, about your support system, about your significant other. What about the churches that address some of the recovery programs? Some doctors, some people want to go to doctors that are in recovery. So recovery coaches, support systems, that's what the social capital looks like. Then we go into humanistic, the humanistic area. So we're talking about their values. What is their knowledge about things? What are some of the skills of life that they want to build from? And then we talk about community. They have no clue about a recovery-based community because this is all new. What they do know is how to go to score drugs, how to go do criminalistic risk behaviors. So introducing them to a recovery-oriented community is a new approach. And we work with that in the Recovery Capital. So how do we determine on those 3 areas? We're going to have an individual who has high recovery capital. She has high social, humanistic, and also community capital. But however, she does have a high problem area. So what we would do in that case is we would not take her and put her in a residential treatment environment or something intense-based, because she has high recovery capital. She needs mutual aids. She would need weekly monitoring. She would need to discover some things about herself through her recovery wellness plan. And what we would do with that is, because we have found this is through trial and error, and I'm so glad that the recovery coaching model is here, is that we've tried to do one size fits all. On the count of 3, say yes? Yes. So what we have determined is, looking at that and saying through an assessment, the recovery capital assessment, is saying we have another individual who has no or very low recovery capital, and she has moderate problem severity, where this is the individual where we would work with getting her into some intensive services. So move forward to the next one. Now, this assessment is what you have. You should have a copy of this. And this is what we use actually to determine our dosage of supports based on the intensity of need. So this is the recovery capital scale that you guys are possibly reviewing, and of course I'll have questions. I have answers for your questions, but I don't think I have time to go through that in thoroughly right now. But this is the scale that we use to determine basically how we're going to work with them on their recovery capital to help build their recovery capital. Now, recovery coaches engage individuals through each stage of recovery. And how do we do that? It's not an assessment that we do, it's a self-assessment. So they get a chance to do their own assessments for their needs. They identify their strengths. They get to explore, what are my strengths? They also get to choose their own path to recovery. Most treatment programs, the only thing they know is the 12-step model. The only thing they know is the 12-step model. You're going to AA. You're going to go get a sponsor. And that may not be that person's path to recovery. So how many people are we losing because the 12 steps may not be their path to recovery? We get them an opportunity to choose their own path to recovery, whatever that looks like. And they get to establish their recovery capital. They start building on their social capital, their humanistic, and of course their community capital. And then we get them engaged into the community. And this is the community. We get them involved in what we call the peer advisory council. These individuals have been coached, they're still being coached, involved in the recovery capital movement, and we call it the recovery movement. And so what they do, we meet monthly. They get involved in Recovery Recognition Day. They get involved with the voices of the individuals that are in treatment, and they get to bring it to the table. So they're sitting among staff. And I think that's what Jack was talking a little bit. They are not sitting on the sidelines, or they're not having a special meeting just for peers. They're sitting with administration and staff. Sharon. Quickly, Sharon was an ex-offender in 2012. She developed her peers in recovery. Now, she volunteered for us 2013, 2014, and she is now a recovery coach. She takes the cab. She goes down to the community where the units for incarcerated women are. She waits for them in the cab. She coached them from the cab all the way to their recovery support service. because we have found when they were being released from prison or jail, they were going to the bus stop and they were going out into that treacherous community, those critical waters where they're just going to soak them up again with all the criminogenic risk and behavior. So we have had much success. I'm so proud to say that, how we have a recovery coach in a cab that's going to the units to pick them up and coach them entirely into treatment. One of the ladies that we have recently, and I won't take a long time, she was picked up by the cab, her coach is with her, and it's not about picking them up. It's about that warm handoff that you have to give to the coach. The coach walks with her weekly while she's in treatment because she's going through a lot of changes. So that coach never leaves her side. She's with her doing treatment through all the changes she's going through with no family, no support. So we're really excited to see how we are making a big difference with the recovery coach model. I also need to say that this is an educational discipline. It's a requirement by the Department of State of Health Services in Texas for an individual to become a recovery coach, and there's ongoing training, which is so critical. And I had something else that I wanted to say quickly. I have 2 minutes. I wanted to talk about, just quickly, transition back to the community. Many women released from prison have lost touch with their families and have faced adjustment problems in integrating into the community. Santa Maria was a part of that system, and we have recovery coaches who are part of that, where we have 2 programs for women that are pregnant at the county jail level, and there's a community-based service that these women can go to. We also have Texas Department of Criminal Justice on the prison side for pregnant females who can go into this system. It's called Bambi. And they're housed in recovery, and they're housed at Santa Maria, and they're housed in a recovery-based community. I also want to say the outgrowth of recent research found the needs of women offenders. And so now we better understand several, if not more, specialized treatment programs, and we are now able to address them, which is so critical. We are helping women. I had a woman that called me last night, actually. She did 13 years in prison. She said, Amelia, you and Kathy were part of my recovery when I was incarcerated. However, I made a different decision. And that was in 2009. I'm calling you today because I need help. What I want to leave you, ladies and gentlemen, with is that we may not have an immediate impact, but we have left an impression on them where they can contact us anytime for services. And that is why we are involved with the Recovery Coach model. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Sure. Okay. Thank you. All right. So we're going to pause to have an additional Q&A portion. Again, for folks on the live stream, please feel free to write your questions into the message box on the right hand of the screen. But we'll go ahead and start with the audience, if you don't mind raising your hand if you have a question, and we'll come find you at the microphone.
What do you take into consideration when choosing the coaches?
The coaches are trained when they come into the training. I'm a trainer for the state of Texas. And you either have to, the qualifying factor is you have to have lived experience or have been affected by the disease of addiction. And not only because of that training on the state level, but I do ongoing training so that they can understand culturally how to deal with the different individuals and what does that look like. We have different coaches. So we have some coaches who just want to go to court with individuals and be an advocate for them, be a voice for them. We have individuals who deal with them just for grief. Just only contact me if someone has lost their baby. Some of our babies are stillborn. Some of them have lost their mom while they're in treatment. Please call me. Those are grief coaches. We have coaches that just want to deal with the family. I'm a family coach so that we can help make this holistic approach and happen. So we have different coaches who do different things. And then we have those coaches like myself who just do it all. I mean, you know, we just do it all. So that's pretty much how we do it. Thanks.
Are there other questions from the audience at this time? Okay. Are we getting any questions from the live stream? Wonderful.
Hi,
Hi, so we have three themes going on right now on chat. So the first one is about incentives. They wanted to know if you have any recommendations about incentives, not just for your mentees, but also your mentors.
Yes, recognition. We recognize them for everything that they do. They get a job. We do a big party. If they are going out on interviews and they didn't use that day, we do high accolades for them. The incentive is long-term recovery, because without long-term recovery, how are you going to achieve being, productive in the community? So they see that individuals like myself and my staff who are still in recovery, who go through challenges in life every day, but we sustain our recovery because we're in the recovery movement. So they get recognized, being a part of the Peer Advisory Council, having a voice, going to Austin, Texas, making some issues with the legislature, understanding their client rights, waking up that people power that I talked about earlier.
The next thing that folks are asking about is your recommendations for pre-release contact. How you recommend doing that? Do you recommend doing that? And if so, what's been successful for you in your work?
Pre-release contact. We have very good relationships with our systems there, our stakeholders, and I mean we've worked and we've nurtured that until we work very well together. The process for Path to Recovery is individuals have to qualify by having a drug and alcohol and a co-occurring disorder, and so that would be the qualifying factor. We've had some women who was totally saying, I don't have a drug problem. Have y'all experienced that? I don't have a drug problem. And we know they have a drug problem, but what we do is we stand there and we say, okay, so we'll work with you. A lady was in our Bambi program for up to 12 months plus, and when she was released, you know what she came to me and said? That's considered pre-release where they are with us. She said, Amelia, I finally realized I have a drug problem. So that's where that recovery capital assessment is so vital, because they might not determine that at the time that we're working with them, but guess what? They come to realize going and being in a safe environment for long-term services works. So now she's engaged in recovery. She's going into the community, and she's going to be a part of my upcoming recovery coach training. So remember, we're trying to not only transform these women that are offenders in the judicial system or in the state of Texas. My vision is much bigger. I want to transform the nation. So that's very, very, very critical to me.
The last question we have from many of the viewers at home is the recovery capital assessment, how they can go about finding it, and how you recommend them starting to work with it.
Okay. I can give this to you guys, and could you guys post it up for us? Okay. We'll take care of that at some point as soon as possible. Also, they can go online. This is a good resource. You guys can, in the audience, can write it down. His name is William White, and this is the guru for this new awesome model, recovery coaching model, but also he is one of the founders for the recovery movement. You'll also find the recovery capital assessment there, and the scale, and explaining the process of how you would introduce that to the individual in recovery.
Are there additional questions from the audience? Okay, well, please join me in giving a hand to Amelia. Thank you. All right, and next up we have Vivian Nixon, who's the Executive Director for the College and Community Fellowship. So thank you. Would you like me to forward your slides as well?
No, I'll do it. Okay. Hello, everyone. So good to talk to you again. Let me just make sure I press the right button, because I have a tendency not to do that. So I'm here to talk to you about the model at College and Community Fellowship and how we're trying to incorporate mentoring into that model with a new grant that we got from the Second Chance Mentoring Act. And it's our first federal grant, so the first couple of weeks, I was a little overwhelmed when I got the packet about the many different websites you have to sign up for and the many different processes. But we really think that this is going to be a really good fit for our program. And I want to talk a lot about successful client engagement and some of the unique ways that we have found to engage people at multiple levels, including the pre-release level. Again, that's me. So we get client engagement success with innovative recruitment strategies, with retention via inspiration rather than retention via rule setting. Like, in order for you to stay in this program, you must follow these 10 rules. We try to inspire people to stay in the program because they're getting something out of it. And by keeping their eyes on the prize, setting high goals for them that they have to strive to meet, and that equals client engagement success. We find if we do these three things successfully, clients will stay engaged. I'm going to show a little video to talk about the innovative recruitment portion of what we do. So we have if you were here for the keynote this morning, does anybody here remember what my childhood dream was? Theater. Good. You were listening this morning. Oh, that's great. So we have a group of alumni from College and Community Fellowship. These are all women who have already earned their college degrees, and we have a very active alumni association, which is also part of our client engagement strategy. And they call themselves, we call ourselves, the Theater for Social Change. And what we've been doing for the last 8 years is meeting on a regular basis, writing down little memories from our lives, both before prison, in prison, after prison, but making sure that when we construct these stories, they somehow relate to public policies that have to do with mass incarceration or women's issues. And we turn this into theater. We go into women's prisons and jails and perform. So we don't walk in with a sign-up sheet that says, sign up for College and Community Fellowship. We walk in to entertain, but the form of entertainment also provides knowledge and inspiration for people to sign up for our program. So I'm going to play a little video, I think. Yes, magic. And we're only going to play about 4 minutes of it, but...
Hello, I'm Cheryl. Hi, Cheryl. Nice to finally meet you. Please have a seat. Oh, we've been oohing and ahhing over your resume, Cheryl. Very impressive. Very impressive. It seems like you have some very excellent experience, Cheryl. You should be proud of yourself and your...
Yeah, it's all the way up. Well, if it's not connected to the speaker system, maybe we'll skip it. Okay, so you get the idea. So I'll tell you what some of these monologues and skits are very powerful. For instance, one of the women does a skit which is the remembrance of her having given birth in the new nursery on Rikers Island and what it was like the day they took her 9-month-old son from her while she was still incarcerated. There's a woman that talks about domestic violence in one of the skits, and the skit that I was about to show was somebody's multiple experiences trying to get a job and the various very funny personalities she came across who were interviewing her and asking her really inappropriate questions about her history. But you'll have to come see us perform live sometime. We've actually performed at the Kellogg Foundation Conference in Asheville, North Carolina last month. So another way that we recruit is we take this group into community-based organizations as well as into prisons. And every year when we have our annual graduation ceremony, this is a picture of our graduation ceremony, this group performs as a gift to the new graduates, but also as inspiration to any of their friends or family members who may be in the audience who have been incarcerated. And we incorporate their families into the process. These are the children of some of our alumni, because they get very inspired when they see their children admiring what they're doing. When women sit in the audience and they see, wow, these kids are happy, they're with their moms, they look like a happy family, the kids are more into their education, it really inspires our women. Another way we inspire women is through workshops. So we don't just do workshops on how to change your criminogenic behavior. We do, like Friday, I think it's this Friday, we're taking a busload of women to L'Oreal, and they're all getting makeovers. They're all getting free makeovers and a free goodie bag of makeup, because we're inspiring them to be their best selves. And women are different than men, and the research has shown that these strict rule-based program designs do not work for women. You have to inspire women to do better based on showing an interest in helping them be their best selves. Now, does she look inspired? She's inspired. And one of the ways we inspire people is that once they enroll in school, if they do well in school, we reward that. Somebody asked about incentives earlier. This woman won a $500 scholarship 2 years ago, and the photographer snapped the picture when we announced her name, and that's how she reacted. That's inspiration. Eyes on the prize. When women come to us, they're not necessarily already enrolled in college. And certainly when Warwick and Jackie go into the prisons to visit women pre-release, they may not already be in college. They may have taken 1 or 2 courses. But one of our primary strategies is that we have a monthly community meeting that all students and potential students are invited to come to, where they get to see other women who have similar backgrounds, similar experience, who have accomplished this goal. So it is not some dream that's hanging out there. It is a dream that 30 other women in the room have already accomplished, and they're still here. They're here to inspire you to keep your eyes on the prize. The other prize is not about you as an individual. The other prize is about your being able to be a contributing member of society. So we have a coalition called the Education from the Inside Out Coalition, and we work to bring higher education opportunities back inside the prison system. In New York State, we have a campaign to bring back TAP grants. We also have a national campaign to bring back Pell grants. I'm very happy to say that a senator from Maryland has introduced legislation to bring back Pell grants, and please go home, write your people, tell them, do it. And women get involved in this campaign, and they feel, wow, I'm doing something meaningful. If I carry this banner, if I go on this march, if I go to that rally, if I attend that press conference, if I write this letter to my congressperson, I am changing the world. That's keeping your eye on the prize. So, for us, college education plus the community environment that we've developed at College and Community Fellowship equals social capital that they can carry with them after they graduate from college into their homes, into their communities, into their careers for a lifetime, and then pass it on to their children. Small interventions make a big difference. The $500 scholarship, the Metro card, the hug, the community of supporting women, all of that makes a big difference. That's College and Community Fellowship. That's my community. That's my family.
Share this with you. Sure. All right. Thank you very much. We'll go ahead and start with questions in the audience. If you want to go ahead and raise your hand. Okay. We have one here.
great presentation. I like the part of the advocacy part. Do you have any challenges with your funders maybe not wanting their funding to be used for that part of your programming? How do you kind of navigate that?
Well, as I said, this is our first federal grant. We also don't get state funding, and we get very little city funding. Most of our funding is foundation funding, and our advocacy work is specifically funded by foundations who want to fund advocacy work. So that part of our work is funded separately.
So I'm going to go ahead and ask a question. Oh, is there somebody in the back? Did I miss it? Oh, great. Okay. There's a gentleman in the back.
Oh, I could tell you stories. What roadblocks have we encountered in our advocacy efforts? Well, I started advocating for the return of college in prisons when I got out of prison in 2001. So it's been 14 years. It's taken 14 years for us to get a bill on the table in New York State to restore TAP grants, and it's taken 14 years for us to convince somebody in Congress to introduce a bill to restore Pell Grants. In the meantime, we've seen a rise in colleges asking about criminal history even after people get released, and trying to deny people access post-release. So, it's a long-term process. And if you care about it, you'll stay engaged. And so the roadblocks we've encountered is that the political process is hard, but none of it was ever won easily. And I'm a civil rights baby, so I'm in it for the long haul.
So how do you encourage women that might not have previously been strong academically, or who maybe received a lot of negative feedback intellectually growing up? How are you approaching them about potentially going to college?
So last night I was at Taconic Correctional Facility for the Barred Prison Initiative graduation. And one of the young women who was graduating, and she was the representative from the class who was speaking, said exactly that. I had negative experiences in school. I never thought I could do it. But the minute people that I respected told me I could do it, I was willing to at least try. And that's, our method. We show them examples of others who can cite the same domestic violence history, who can cite the same addiction history, the same incarceration history, but say, despite all of that, I did it. And so then the women believe, they're willing to try. And we provide tutors and mentors and all kinds of other assistance to help people get through the rough spots.
And I think we have another question from the audience.
I oversee vocational services, and I have women who are 60 plus, and they're frustrated. They're doing GED, pre-GED and GED, and their desire is to eventually be able to take college courses. Mm-hmm. But now with the changes in the Common Core, they really have felt that everything is set back, like they have to relearn or learn a lot of areas that they are foreign to begin with. And and the staff, we're very limited in terms of the staff, and we're always encouraging them and doing one-on-one tutoring. What else do you see as part of the mentoring and support that we could do to encourage them? Because I'm afraid that they're eventually just going to give up.
Okay. So we have more than 10 60-plus graduates. Some of them have gone on to master's degrees, and one has a PhD from Columbia. And she got it when she was like 66. So it can be done. We partner with universities, because universities have a wealth of students who want to be socially engaged, who want to be tutors, and who have the patience to work with someone who really does have to relearn stuff. So I would say partner with your local community college or your local universities to get the extra help you need.
Did we have another audience question? I thought that we may have had. Okay. Do we have questions coming in via the live stream? Wonderful.
So there's two major themes that are coming in from the live stream. One especially about the barriers for education and employment. Just in your work and in the history of working with this population, What are the major barriers that you have seen time and time again, and what have been some of your success stories or words of wisdom that you would want to share with our viewers at home, and helpful hints to kind of help their clients along the way through that?
Great question. So I did talk already about the barrier of colleges asking more and more about criminal convictions on applications, and we could go and fight for individual people to get into colleges, but we took on a systems approach, and we wrote a bill that's being considered by New York State right now called the Fair Access to Education Act, which would make it illegal for colleges to base college admission based on criminal history. But as far as other barriers, someone came to us, her name is Kim. Early on when I was first executive director, she wanted to be a nurse, and every other reentry organization she went to told her, you can't do that. You have a drug conviction. Pick something else. When people come to college and community fellowship, one of the questions on our intake form is, what do you want to be when you grow up? And when Kim was asked that question and she said a nurse, we said, okay, there's going to be some barriers, but we're going to help you overcome them. So she went to school. While she was in school, we helped her get a certificate of relief from disabilities. That's a document you can get here in the state of New York that basically says you're rehabilitated. We helped her pass her clinical exams, and we helped her pass the licensing exam. She is now not only a registered nurse, she is in school again because she wants to become a nurse practitioner. When people have a dream, the worst thing you can do to stop them from succeeding in anything is tell them that they have to do something else. And so that's just a foundational principle with me, that people will only succeed at what they're on earth to do. And if you try to get them to do something else, they'll fail.
So we've had a couple of questions coming in from different practitioners across the country, especially talking about their clients and graduates who have become underemployed even after going through the program. So they're wondering, one, how do you continue to work with this population? And second, how do you start to educate your folks coming in about new opportunities that they might have not thought about prior?
Well, sometimes we do job fairs. We bring in speakers from different careers because there are gaps in knowledge where students don't even know what's possible. They don't know what they want to study. So we give them options. We work with the career centers at the city universities. We have really good counselors who go above and beyond the call of duty with students, and they go out into the community and find volunteers to come in and talk about various careers, and our board also provides those resources. So it's constantly educating people, empowering people, and inspiring people to do the best they can. And we've seen people make some really slow progress over the years. I mean, I can think of one woman, Selena. Selena has been a part of CCF for 15 years. And she has graduated, she has a master's degree, but she's still underemployed because she has low self-confidence. She's not unemployed, she has a decent job, but she has to work that job plus a part-time job to really maintain her lifestyle. We're just trying to build up her confidence. So the last thing we did was we put her in the Theater for Social Change. So now she comes around and she gets on stage and she gets to build up her confidence. It's about long-term relationship building. Remember, these women weren't broken down in a day. They were broken down by years of trauma and years of bad experiences. So it's going to take years to build them up.
Thank you very much. Do we have another?
Can I just add to one thing?
Please.
I think it was yesterday, my staff went to a training from Access VR, and they're doing something where they're providing formerly incarcerated individuals with substance abuse histories. They'll do employment placement for 6 months where they'll pay the person's salary. Really, they try to limit it to 3 months because they're saying that at 3 months you should know whether or not you're going to keep the individual employed. So they'll pay for those initial, I think it's 850 hours of work, so that it'll give you as the employer an opportunity to learn whether or not you think this person has the skill set that you need for the role, and it'll give the individual the opportunity to learn a new skill. If it doesn't work out, then at least they have something that they can put in their resume. So that's Access VR.
Yeah, there's a few agencies in New York that have similar grants. The Fortune Society runs a similar program where they place people in other agencies, but Fortune pays them with grant money. Okay, we're done.
Yes. Thank you very much. Everyone join me in saying thank you. Thank you. So I think we have time just for a few additional questions, and we're going to open it up to all of our speakers just to kind of wrap things up. So first we'll go, I have several questions to ask, but first we'll go to the audience if there are additional questions for any of the speakers. Okay, I'll go ahead. Jack, first question's for you, and then I'll hand you the microphone. You, in your presentation, talked a lot about engaging different parts of the system and had spoken a little bit about where maybe the goals of the different, thank you, the goals of some of the different players in the system might be different. So just like to hear some additional words from you on how folks can get different players within the system on the same page to go towards the same goal.
Oh, so is this the softball, by the way? Is this the softball
I'm the
question?
plant, right?
Yeah, exactly. You are not the plant. Wait, I want my money back. So let me just say that. So it's a very good question, especially when you are new into a system. So when you first got your grant or you first started doing your mentoring work, and you got introduced to your partners, the first starting point is everybody understand kind of what is our mission. What is the mission of this organization, that organization? Because that's a good base for understanding what we do, right? So I'm answering your question from a process standpoint. And so if you're new into that room where everybody else knows each other, state your mission. What is it that I do? And then from there, then you go to that value add slide I had up, is you figure out then, okay, so now I know what I do. I know what everybody else does. Everybody else is driving in what general direction? Now listen, you got a lead on this, right? It's it's criminal justice. So you know you're going to have to be in the ballpark of something to do with public safety. So that's kind of the direction in which to go. So understand everybody else's mission, be at the table, and frame what you do. And again, I know I keep going back to mentoring, but frame what you do within a public safety context. So how to get them there is just through conversation. But the kind of the bait is that you present yourself as promoting public safety, as reducing crime, as reducing recidivism, helping people reenter. If you come in with that framework, the ears that hear that are more likely to say, this is a partner that I want on board, or this person who got a grant is forced to be here, but they're talking the language that I'm talking. And by the way, they must do the reverse to you at some point also, right? But I'm taking it from the angle of Katie's question of, you're kind of newer into an existing structure. So don't go in with your story, tell your story within the framework of the system in which you are entering, right? If I want to sell hamburgers and I get in with McDonald's and Burger King and Epic Burger and all those, I better be talking about something that's regarding how I can make their hamburger better. Because if I'm talking about hot dogs or pizza, and Chicago has the best, but if I'm talking about hot dogs or pizza, see, I knew I was going to work that in somehow. You know, I'm on the outside, and I'll be tolerated for as long as need be, but I'm in the conversation at least. So in a very general sense to what is a complex set of conversations, that's how I'd start that out.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I'm actually told we're at time. So we're going to go ahead and wrap up. But I would encourage folks that have additional questions about these topics to please, either if you're here in person, please feel free to come up and speak to the speakers who are here. For those on the live stream, please contact your technical assistance provider for additional conversations around these topics as well. We want to thank all of you in the audience here in person, everybody on the live stream, and of course our wonderful presenters for joining us today. Please let's end with some positive reinforcement and a big round of applause for everyone. Thank you.